What's going on, duelists? It's your boy Nick, bringing you today on the channel an update to my Mutant deck profile for the post-Supreme Darkness format. For those of you new to the channel, welcome. My name is Nick. We do Yu-Gi-Oh! Content mainly focused around rogue and casual decks alike. If that's the kind of Yu-Gi-Oh! That you're interested in, then I highly encourage you to subscribe to the channel. We are currently working our way to 3,000 subscribers, and I need your help to get there. So Mutant is a deck that has a very rich history with this channel. It was one of the more popular decks I brought when the channel was still in its infancy. I had like under 300 subscribers at the time, and I brought Mutant to the channel and everybody loved it. I got a lot of subscribers from that deck list, and over time I optimized Mutant up until the point when Goaty was released in the TCG, and then I was pretty sure I was one of the first people to play Mutant mixed with Goaty. I'm almost positive, like I will die on that hill. And that deck profile is actually, to this day, I think my most watched Yu-Gi-Oh! Video on the channel. Has almost like 8,000 views, which, I mean, for me, that's insane. That's a lot. I'm a very like small time channel, but we got some interesting like indirect support, I guess I would say, for Mutant in Supreme Darkness, in the sense that they're not Mutant in name, but there's a series of cards that happen to synergize with Mutant's playstyle, which, if for those of you who are familiar with the deck, you know that Mutant banishes a lot of things for cost to trigger a lot of their effects. And honestly, it's just an archetype that I have a really soft spot for. It's a deck that to me is a really cool TCG exclusive. I wish the deck was better than it is. I'm not sitting here saying that the deck is terrible. It's absolutely playable and you can have a blast with it. But I personally feel that the ceiling is very low in a pure build, unless you're running a lot of like floodgates. But the problem is that a lot of the good floodgates that you could play in this deck are either banned or limited. So I feel like going down that route isn't really the greatest in my opinion. So I took an interesting approach with this particular list that you guys will see in the profile. But like I said, thank you all for your continued support. Like the video, comment down below what your thoughts are on a pure Mutant list. And yeah, let's just dive headfirst into this profile. So it's a 45 card main deck, and I think it's really consistent overall, and you'll see here shortly. So we're going to start with the monster lineup. We do play 3 copies of Mutant MO5, followed by 3 copies of Mutant ST46, and followed by 3 copies of Mutant, their most recent addition to the deck. So we're going to go over all these cards in sequence. So MO5, well, they're all starters, right? Mutant's more of an extender, but it also can function as a starter if need be. But MO5, level 2 water psychic effect monster. Upon normal or special, allows you to add a mutant monster from the deck to your hand. Very cool effect. And then it has a secondary ability, which both MO5 and ST46, and to an extent Mutant share. And that is, you contribute this card, then banish a card from your hand or face-up field for cost. And then you can special summon one of your Mutant bosses from your hand or the deck based on the type of card you banish. So if you banished a monster, you can summon Mutant Beast. If you banish a spell, you could summon Mutant Mist. And if you banish a trap, you can summon Mutant Arsenal. Now we'll get to the bosses momentarily, but that's pretty much how MO5 works. Searcher on summon, and then by attributing himself and banishing a card from hand or field, you're able to summon any one of your specific Mutant bosses based on the type of card banished. So pretty cool in theory, but what makes me laugh about this deck is, like, as much as they love banishing things, there isn't a single card in this archetype that actually does something when banished, which I still laugh about to this day. Maybe one day we'll get a card for Mutant that like gives you some kind of benefit when banished, like maybe like a Necroface-esque type of card. Maybe not on that like ridiculous level, but you get what I'm trying to say. But anyway, moving on to ST46. So just like MO5, he upon normal or special gives you a search. In this case though, not for a monster, but for a spell trap belonging to the archetype. And then has the exact same secondary effect of MO5, where you contribute himself, banish a face-up card from the hand or field, and then depending on the type of card banished, you're either summoning Mutant Beast, Mist, or Arsenal from your hand or deck. It's interesting to note that Mutant ST46, the ST in the name represents the fact that he can search spells and traps, and then the M in MO5 represents the fact that he can search for the monsters, which is pretty cool. Then we have Mutant. This card is one of the more recent additions to the deck, which came out in Battle of Chaos, and it reads as follows. If you control a Mutant card, you can special summon this card from your hand. So it is an extender for the theme, very cool. One thing I also want to bring up before we go further is all of these cards are summonable off of Emergency Teleport, which I think is amazing because they're all level 3 or lower psychics, which just further increases the deck's consistency. But anyway, if you control a mutant card, special summon this card from your hand, then you contribute this card, but banish a mutant card specifically from your hand or deck to special summon the appropriate mutant boss, but you take damage equal to that monster's attack when summoned. So, unlike MO5 and ST46, where you have to banish cards from your hand or that you control face up, Mutant allows you to tribute himself and banish a mutant card specifically from the hand or the deck, making Mutant an actual one card, like, I wouldn't say combo, but a one card summon in this deck. Because with just a single Mutant and no other cards in play, you can get to any one of your Mutant bosses because you could banish the appropriate card from your deck. Whereas like MO5 and ST kind of need an additional card, which granted they do search when summoned, but it's pretty seldom where you're going to be like banishing the card you searched off of these unless you were in a pinch. That's just my own opinion, obviously. But this is your suite of like starters, I would say. So you max out on starters. Like I said, they're all summonable off of E-Telly, which we are also playing 3 copies of. So you have basically 12 starters in this deck, which I think is pretty good for, you know, a 45 card. About as consistent as you're going to get, at least with the current support that we have access to. Now moving on to the mutant bosses, we play 2 Mutant Beast, 1 Mutant Mist, and 1 Mutant Arsenal. I pretty much live and die by this particular ratio. This is the ratio of bosses that I've played since day 1, at least in my pure mutant list. I know the ratios changed when I brought Goaty into the equation, but that's besides the point. In a pure build, I still think this is the most optimal ratio for bosses. Yes, I'm aware that they're not ideal to draw, which is again why I chose to play a slightly larger deck count at 45, because you decrease the odds of drawing these garnets. Now, I think 2 beasts. I mean, you could play 1 beast, right? But I feel like in a grind game, because one of the things that Mutant has trouble with, in my opinion, is closing games out quickly, because they don't really put up that much damage in the grand scheme. It's not like you're playing Tenpai or something that can just lethal your opponent. You're usually going to have some kind of a back and forth with your opponent, a bit of a grind game, so to speak. And I feel like the second beast always comes up in those scenarios. So let's talk about them briefly. So beast, neither of them, all of them can only be special summoned by the effect of a mutant card specifically. So they can't be like summoned by other means and whatnot. Each one of them though has targeting immunity from the type of card that you banished for their summon. So you know how you banish a monster to summon Beast, you banish a spell to summon Mist, you banish a trap for Arsenal. Well, that means Beast cannot be targeted by monster effects, Mist cannot be targeted by spells, and Arsenal cannot be targeted by traps, which is pretty cool protection. Then, while they're on the field, they each have a quick effect, which you can trigger by banishing a card from your hand or that you control for cost. Beast's effect is that he can negate your opponent's spell card or spell effect and banish it. Pretty cool effect there. Mist is that when a trap or trap effect is activated, you get to draw 2 cards. And then Arsenal is when a monster effect is activated, you get to target a monster the opponent controls and banish it. So Beast and Arsenal, in my opinion, are the most proactive ones. Mist is the only one that's more reactive, because how often is your opponent activating a trap, like outside of the Dominus cards or like Impermanence, for example? In a more control like focused deck, Mist really shines, obviously. But against most matchups, he's just in here as an additional like boss to summon. You seldom get his effect off most of the time. Beast and Arsenal are the ones you're usually getting the most value from. And yeah, they're all level 8s. They're all different types and attributes. One of my favorite cards to play in this deck was There Can Be Only One, but obviously that card's now limited, so its utility is very much diminished in my opinion. But these all are amazing bosses in their own right. They also float as well when they're destroyed. Beast will let you grab a banished mutant trap back to your hand. Mist will let you grab a banished mutant monster to your hand, and then Arsenal will let you grab a banished mutant spell back to your hand. So there's some level of recursion here in this theme. Again, it's a little bit inconsistent because it's at the whim of your opponent. You know, they do have to be destroyed. But, you know, at least they do give you that, like, recursion back. It would be much worse if they didn't float at all. But they're all pretty cool bosses in their own respect. And like I said, playing 2 Beast, 1 Mist, 1 Arsenal, in my opinion, is the perfect ratio in a pure build. Now moving on, we have a brand new card out of Supreme Darkness. 3 copies of Minimalian. This is a very interesting card in my opinion. It's a level 4 water psychic effect monster. 100 attack and defense. It's not an E-Telly target, sadly, but it is basically an extender slash starter for this deck. So remember when I said we have 12 starters? Well, this card technically makes it so that we have 15 starters in the deck, counting Emergency Teleport. What he does is you can banish one other card from your hand for cost to special summon this card from your hand. Then while he's on the field, you can banish a face-up level 4 or lower monster you control. He could banish himself. And then you can special summon from your deck one monster with the same original type and attribute that the banished monster had, but 1 or 2 levels lower than that target's original level. So pretty much if you use Minimalian on himself, meaning you target himself, banish it, he can summon a water psychic from the deck that is 1 or 2 levels lower than his, which obviously it means he's able to summon MO5 and ST46 from the deck respectively. So you have even more access to your Mutant engine with just this card alone. And the fact that he's an extender is crazy, because now that means like in hands where you draw like MO5 plus Minimalian, if you normal summon the MO5 and it gets like impermed or something, you can now just extend with this card from your hand, you know, banishing any other card, specialing this, and then triggering his effect to just like float into an ST now. And then you're still getting access to your engine. So this card is a huge consistency boost for the deck. Really strong support. I mean, the only thing it's lacking is a Mutant in its name. Otherwise, it would have been perfect. But definitely want to max out on this card in any pure Mutant list moving forward. I think this card is definitely underrated. Any Mutant list that is not running this card is just doing itself a disservice. This card is absolutely broken for the deck. So definitely want to play 3 copies of that. Up next, we have from an older set, 2 copies of Psychic Processor. This card came out, I believe, in Photon Hypernova, I think? Correct me if I'm wrong. But it is a level 3 Dark Psychic monster, so yet again another E-Telly target. But this card has a couple of interesting effects. The first of which is you can banish this card you control to special summon up to 2 Machine, Psychic, and or Cybers monsters from your hand. We don't play any Machines or Psychic, or Cybers, excuse me, obviously. So mainly what this card's purpose is in hands where you open like multiple mutants, like, you know, MO5 plus ST, for example, and then you have this, you can normal summon this, activate its effect to banish itself, and then summon both MO5 and ST from your hand, and then trigger both of their effects, obviously, which is really cool. He does have a secondary effect where during the standby phase of the next turn, after this card was banished, you can add this banished card back to the hand. So this reminds me a lot of Guard Ghost, an old zombie tech card I was playing in my original pure Mutant list, because it was a card that Mutant could banish for cost, but it would self-recur. Meaning the cost we paid for our Mutant wasn't really cost because we got it refunded on the next turn. That's exactly what this card does, but it works out so much better because it's a Psychic and it's searchable within engine, you know, through E-Telly, obviously. So it's very easily accessible, and you could basically, you know, whether he's banishing himself for his own effect, or you're banishing this card for your Mutant costs, whether that be your starters or for your Mutant boss effects, this is a card you banish and it constantly just comes back. Meaning that like you're never minusing yourself in card advantage, and I think that's huge. So 2 copies of Psychic Processor is perfect in my opinion. I wouldn't play 3 of this. I just don't want to get like too bricky and have too many normal summons in the hand, obviously, which is never really a good thing. So I've been playing the deck at 2 and it's been working out fine. Up next, 2 copies of Nemesis Corridor. This should be pretty self-explanatory. Obviously, Thunder Dragon Colossus is back, and this card is just a 1-card Colossus setup. So no need to really explain that any further. And then to round out the rest of the monster lineup, we do play 3 Ash Blossom, followed by everybody's favorite card, triple copies of Dimension Shifter. Until this card gets banned, this deck will forever main deck this card. It's literally the glue that holds it all together, in my opinion. This card is really cracked. And I know a lot of people have very strong opinions on this card, but honestly, let me have my fun Mutant deck. It is what it is. You guys can play, you know, your Fiendsmith, Raziel, Wombo, combo nonsense. I'm just trying to summon Beast and Arsenal and, you know, end on a Dimension Shifter pass. Like, just let me have my fun, please. So that wraps up the monster count. Now we're diving into the spells, of which we are on 3 copies of Mutant Evolution Lab. Again, because we're maxing out on all the Mutant like starters, I feel like playing 3 copies of Evo Lab is crucial, because this allows you to extend with the mutants that are still dead in the hand. Because on activation, you can special a level 4 lower mutant from your hand or banishment. This can also help you cycle the level 8s when you do inevitably draw them. You can place them on the bottom of the deck and draw a card. And it also gives your mutants a slight stat buff while they're on the field. So overall, pretty cool card at 3. Then we have the 1 copy of Mutant Fusion. I think this card is fine as a 1-of in the deck. It is searchable. We do side deck a 2nd copy for those games where we are forced to go 2nd. And that's pretty much all I have to say as far as that's concerned. Up next, a playset of Emergency Teleport. Again, this card functions as a pseudo starter / extender for the theme. All of your like starters and extenders are all fit within the requirements of this card, so definitely play 3 E-Tele. Not even once per turn. Card is absolutely custom. Then up next, we have another brand new card from Supreme Darkness. 2 copies of Shadow Severing Strike. This is a new continuous spell that came out in that set, and it reads as follows. If a card or cards is banished from the field, from the hand and or the field to activate a monster effect, you can apply one of the following effects based on the type of card banished. So if you banished a monster, you get to negate the effects of 1 face-up spell trap on the field until the end of the turn. If you banish a spell, you can draw 2 cards, and if you banished a trap, you can banish 1 monster on the field, non-target. Then, if this card is banished, you can, to activate a monster effect specifically, you can add one of your banished cards back to your hand, except itself. So this card is an interesting tech choice. Again, I wouldn't max out at 3, because by itself it does nothing. This is one of those types of cards that only gives you value if you're already able to play the game. So in the hands where, you're bricked or don't have any, plays, this card is not helping that situation, obviously. So that's why it's just a 2-of. I wouldn't play 3 for that reason. But in the situations where you are able to play, this card is really strong, in my opinion, giving Mutant some additional value back for their investments, I would say. And overall, it's been really fun in testing. I think 2 of this card is really nice, and it's the perfect fit for a kind of deck like this. Then to round out the last spell, the 1 of Call by the Grave, obviously pretty self-explanatory there. Moving into the traps, we do play triple copies of Mutant Cry, pretty much an archetypal Tri-Brigade Revolt, for those of you unfamiliar. And then we have 1 copy of Mutant Expansion, which is basically an in-archetype E-Tele with protection built in for your monsters. So pretty cool there. Then we do play 3 Infinite Impermanence, followed by 1 copy of Draco Utopian Aura, and 1, again, another new card from Supreme Darkness, copy of DD Post, a continuous trap, in the same vein as Shadow Severing Strike. It's a card that doesn't do anything by itself, but if you're already able to play it, this card has a few neat effects. Firstly, monsters you control gain 300 attack for each card type banished, monster spell trap. So you basically, if you have 1 of each card type banished, all of your monsters are gaining a 900 attack stat buff, which I think is pretty significant. Then, once per turn during the main phase, you can banish a card from hand or grave, and then shuffle 1 of your banished cards back into the deck. So this card also lets you recycle cards from your banished zone, which is pretty cool. And then if this card is banished by any means, you can activate this effect to place it face up on your field. And you can do that, you can only do that once per turn, obviously. But this is another card similar to Psychic Processor that you can banish for your mutant costs, and it just comes right back immediately. So it almost makes the cost like free or non-existent. So pretty cool overall. This rounds out the main deck, 45 card list, like I said. Now we're going to be diving into the extra deck, of which we're on 2 copies of Mutant Synthesis and 1 copy of Mutant Ultimus. These are the Mutant Fusions, obviously, that you play with an archetype. I still swear by this ratio. 2 Synthesis, 1 Ultimus is all you need. Unless you're playing like Pot of Extravagance or something like that, then I would recommend maxing out on both. But since we're not playing Extrav in this list, I think 1 and 1 is perfectly fine. Or I'm sorry, 2 and 1. Then we do play 1 copy of Thunder Dragon Colossus, because obviously we are playing the Nemesis Corridors. Colossus being legal is really cool. And then for the Exceeses, we play a couple rank 8s, 1 number 1 Infection Buzz King, 1 number 23 Lancelot. The Lancelot is here to enable a Zeus line, of which we overlay Pain Gainer on top of Lancelot, followed by Zeus on top of the Pain Gainer, and that gives us a 4-mat Zeus, which is obviously really strong. So that wraps up the Excees monsters. Pretty self-explanatory cards there. A lot of these Exceeses are very popular. And then up next, we just have our generic suite of links. We have 1 All Mirage, 1 IP, 1 Proxy F Magician, 1 SP Little Knight, 1 Psyframe Lord Lambda. You're probably questioning this. A little bit of a spoiler, in the side deck we do play a small Psyframe package. And then to round out the last 2 links, 1 copy of Blackluster Soldier, Soldier of Chaos, followed by 1 Topologic Zeroboros in the extra deck. Now moving on to the side, again, side deck's always up to personal preference. We are playing a small Psyframe package that consists of 2 copies of Delta, 1 Gamma, 1 Driver. We side into this, as needed, and this is what makes the Lambda and the extra deck make sense, obviously. Then we also play 3 copies of Mind Control and 1 copy of Change of Heart for going second. One thing that I noticed with this deck is if you're able to steal an opponent's monster, you can use that monster as cost for your own mutant effects, which I think is really cool. Like, that's something that no other deck can capitalize on really or do. So like, you can mind control your opponent's card, comes to your side of the board. If you summon a Mutant MO5, you know, get the search on summon, and then you want to activate Mutant MO5's effect to summon one of your Mutant bosses, you contribute MO5, banish their monster that's now under your control to summon like your Mutant Beast, for example. And again, it just makes the cost of the mutants in essence free because you're not using your own cards for it, which I think is really cool. So we max out on mind controls, and then obviously Change of Heart's limited still. Then we just have 2 Cosmic Cyclones. You know, there's going to be random oddball control decks you'll come across. Cyclones do come up every once in a while, although you probably could sub this card for anything else you would like. We do play the second copy of Mutant Fusion for when we know we're going second. And then if we're going first, again, in the same vein as the mind controls and the Change of Hearts, we are on a playset of Crackdowns. Because again, if you can steal your opponent's monsters and use them for the cost of your own effects, it makes Mutant like feel way, way better than it actually is. So 3 Crackdowns when you're going first, and then we do play the second copy of Draco Aura for when we know we're going first as well. So again, take the side deck with a bit of a grain of salt. It's not the most optimized side deck I've brought to the channel, but again, this deck, in my opinion, isn't really designed to compete with hard meta. You know, you're not going to go to locals and stare down, you know, full power Malice and Ryziel and expect to come out topping with this deck. This is more of just casual budget list you can build when in some spare time. This entire deck probably costs less than like $50 as far as the main deck is concerned, maybe even less than that. And yeah, it's just a deck that, you know, I built just to have fun with and kind of relive some old memories. Mutant, I do have a very good soft spot for, and it's a fun deck overall. I think amongst your friends, this deck can actually cheese a bunch of wins, and you'll have a great time doing it. But as far as like trying to hard compete with this deck, I don't think pure Mutant is the right like deck for that. And I'm just being completely honest, you know, transparent with my viewers. I'm not trying to sit here and pull a Team Sam and, you know, make it sound like the deck is tier 0 when it's not. Yeah, it's just a fun, casual deck you can put together, play amongst your friends, you know, just have some laid-back duels and just chill. And yeah, like I said, that's going to wrap up the deck profile for the Post-Supreme Darkness. If you duelists want to see combos and test hands for this deck, then by all means, chime down in the comments below, let me know. I have absolutely no problem bringing that to you if that's what you want. And with that being said, stay tuned for more awesome content coming your way post-Supreme Darkness. Make sure you like the video, comment down below, subscribe if you're not already. And with that being said, this is Nick, hitting that end phase. Peace.